cruise, so just want to get some general information. I'm deciding where to go next year because I have 100,000 points, so I should cash it out.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure Air Canada is going to change the terms and conditions next year.
Yeah, probably. What do you want to learn from Stephanie?
Anything specific? Well, just general about cruises. I mean, maybe I can combine the points of the cruises some way. I don't know.
Okay.
Go.
Maybe the port
or something.
Like where he should fly to, which port to fly to. Yeah.
So
good. Anthony, you're next.
Hi everybody. My name's Anthony Ma. The only two sort of cruises I've ever taken are one in the Adriatic Sea going from Athens to Venice, and another one going south in Chile on a cruise ferry from down to Patagonia, right? So
nice.
They were kind of fun, but yeah, the main issue I find with cruises is that they usually book you they require double occupancy, right? So
yeah.
It doesn't work too well if you're single.
No, single supplement.
Right? And you can't find a friend,
Maybe we should talk about that, single supplement. So, yeah, that's a good one.
So yeah, I just came to listen more about it. I've actually been offered a couple of jobs to work in cruise ships too.
Sure, come on in. We're just having everyone introduce themselves, so we'll get to you in a bit.
Thank you.
First, find a place to sit.
Yeah.
Next one is Angela.
Hi, my name is Angela. I'm here to learn about
if you guys want to sit together.
in and outs of cruising.
Hey, welcome. Come on in. Yeah, there's one here. Hey, got the last seat? Perfect. There's one more in the back actually.
Couple of chairs left.
Yeah, sorry. Anyways, yeah, keep going.
I'm here to learn about the in and outs of cruising.
Okay, got it. Next.
I'm Mary. I'm with my friend Judah. I've been cruising, but I want to learn some more.
You want to go more? Okay.
I did right now.
Next.
Hi, I'm Asi. I have no experience, and I just hoping to get some general information here.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name's Nathan. Like some of you guys, I don't have very much experience. I'm here to learn tips, hacks, tricks of the trade. And if this is being recorded, are we able to view it on YouTube or
I'm streaming it live right now, so if you friend me on Facebook, you can get a copy of the entire presentation on my Facebook page or YouTube.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Carlos. I have no experience in cruise, so I'm here to learn whatever Stephanie can.
Next.
Hi, I'm Sylvia, and I have a tiny bit of experience on one cruise, and I'm just interested to find out the hacks as well.
All right.
I don't know if I can call it cruising, but I love being out on the water. So kayaking, small boats, big boats, sailboats, but never been on a cruise.
Okay. Next.
DJ, I've been on a few cruises, but not too crazy about the scene, but if I can learn ways to use it to get places and travel, then that'll be fun.
Gotcha.
I'm Richard, just curious about this kind of travel. So yeah, we've been on a couple cruises, but yeah.
All right then.
I'm Judith, and I've actually never been on a cruise before, so I think this talk would be good.
Anything you want to learn specifically from?
Sure, there's going to be lots for me to learn.
Hi everyone, my name is Kendrick. I've only been in one cruise before, and
where to?
I started in Miami and then went to Jamaica and in the Cayman Islands.
Caribbean.
It was a 5-day cruise. It was really cheap. I'm the website that Stephanie showed you is the same website I use. I got a cruise. It's like 5-day Caribbean cruise for like $270 Canadian, including tax. So it's ridiculous. And I ate so much lobster and prime rib. I felt like I was ripping off the cruise ship. But yeah, so I'd love to go to more cruises. I was kind of saving it when I'm a little bit older because it's really like leisurely. So so I'm doing like the harder travel right now where I can take a more beating. But then like when I'm older and I want to just chill out, relax, eat a lot of bad food, then I can go to the cruise route. Let's see if do we have any more. I know we have one guy coming in later, but he messaged me about it. So so Steph's gonna do a talk until about 2, and then we'll have a washroom break, and then The washroom break will be about 5 to 10 minutes. Afterwards, Steph will resume till about 2:30 to wrap it up. All right? So let me introduce the meetup first. So hello everyone, welcome to Travel and Live Free. My name is Kendrick. I'm the host of this meetup. We've been running this meetup now for over 4 years now, I think. So, and we've we've helped many people, go to their bucket list dream destination. So I know a lot of people were scared before to travel, but now, I think we got a lot of speakers like Steph, who's been traveling a lot, to share to you her experiences on how to travel safer, cheaper, and better. The 3 topics that we cover in this meetup is number 1, how to save money on travel. Number 2, how to travel around the world as a Canadian. And number 3 is how to work while you're traveling, so that if you don't want to go back home, you can keep working. So I try to get speakers to come in on any of those 3 topics. So if you know anybody that wants to speak, or you yourself, if you want to speak, just let me know, and we can go arrange something. All right, so without further delay, let me introduce Steph. So Steph is our regular meetup speaker here. She's done so many talks before on around the world travel, and today she's doing a talk on cruise ships. So without further delay, everyone please welcome Steph.
Thanks for that. Before we discuss adventurous and cheap cruising in detail, I'd like to invest just a couple minutes to think about our big picture masterpiece. Was anybody at my talk in January or in November?
Yes.
Okay. We actually have a number of new faces. In my previous meetup, I talked a little bit about some what you would call new strategies about how to think about your life. Travel is an important aspect of my life, but I always assess it as an aspect of my life and how it fits into what I call my life's masterpiece. Last time, I introduced 2 specific tactics that you might be able to use to help you clarify how travel can fit in your life. That was writing what's called a living eulogy, and also doing some visualization. The living eulogy is an interesting one. It's where you take yourself to a day where maybe you're not around anymore, and you write what you would hope people, or even just your legacy, is after you're gone. The technique is good because it forces you to think about death and think about a time when you're not going to be here, and when you're not going to be here to achieve the goals that you otherwise want to achieve. That's a technique that I suggest people take a look at. I'll move on by saying that constantly reevaluating how you think about your life is an important part of traveling as well. As I've said, traveling is just a part of your life, and how it fits in is important for you to know that it changes and evolves with you. So I'm always beholding my masterpiece with what I would call a generous critical eye. And like, does this fit me anymore? Am I evolving and changing? My last presentation, I exclaimed that adventure is my number 1 value. None of my life aligns with this adventurous value. A funny thing happened. I reflected and thought through a couple months of for this contending through what I consider to be probably the toughest bout of post-travel blues. Some people call it post-travel fatigue. Some people even call it post-travel depression. What was going on? I realized that I have been very positive about world travel up to this point. In all of my previous meetups, I've waxed poetic about the benefits and the advantages and how it's changed my life. That remains true, but now I'll balance with some of the challenges. One challenge in particular that I've been facing is knowing when to rest and relax. After 7 months of backpacking last year, 4 of which was immersed in Africa bush camping amongst wild animals, I was fucking burnt out. I tried to encourage myself by creating art immediately. Within a month of landing back in Vancouver, I was at this meetup presenting. I presented another time. I reinvigorated my YouTube and my social media. Then I would say the last couple months, I've crashed. I've done absolutely nothing. A family member of mine has Amazon Prime. And that's all I've been doing. Watching TV,
Binge watching.
sleeping. It's been great. I could judge myself and say, I'm being a lazy slob. Guess what then? I'm a lazy slob. So what? Part of creating the masterpiece of your life is knowing which technique to use when. Up to this point, my masterpiece has been bold and loud and in your face. And that does represent me a lot of the time. But I would say right now, in this current moment, as I'm speaking with all of you, I want it still vibrant, but with just some more ease. That's my fancy way of saying that I still want my adventure, but I just want less work on me and less risk on me. That will lead into what's the topic of this meetup, what I consider, which is adventurous and cheap cruises. Does such a thing even exist? Quick comments. What do you think about when I say the word cruises? Does anybody have an idea?
I don't know. I don't. The one I went on to, I didn't really like it because it's just, and I don't want to gain a whole bunch of weight because I know how hard it is to lose it later.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you can't escape off that boat. Like you can for little bits, but I prefer nature and stuff, so it's not my thing. But I think maybe in the future I might like to do some.
Okay. Any other comments about what they think when I say cruises?
You definitely gain weight. I even tried to work out in the cruise ship.
Yeah.
There was a gym there. I still gained 10 pounds.
Wow.
Oh man.
Okay.
You can't stop it.
Okay.
Yeah, I just found it too entitled and it just is not my scene at all. But we were with family both times, so that was kind of the point. But really, it was kind of suffocating, quite frankly.
Okay.
For me.
Okay. So we hear some sentiments. Some people might add boring, Alaska again. Or they might say expensive. I ain't rich and bougie like that. In fact, at least for me, I found cruises one of the most adventurous and cheapest ways to travel if you know what you're doing. In this meetup, I hope to impart on you guys some of the stunning strategies that you can use to see whether maybe cruising can actually work with you and your lifestyle. Now, what would we say about cruises that we hope to learn in this meetup? I'd say 3 things. First, we're going to learn how you search for the adventurous cruise itineraries. Then, how you save hundreds, thousands.
Yeah. You can sit on the table as well. So if someone else is on the table, then you can grab my seat.
Where would you like to sit from? With the arms? No.
Yes, keep going.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. So what we will be covering in detail today is, number 1, how to search for the adventurous cruise itineraries. Number 2, how to save hundreds, thousands, 75% off. 3, how to savor your time in port and plan your excursions to your dream destinations. Many of you who've attended my previous talks will know that I am an extreme adventure traveler, but maybe fewer of you know about what I'd call my cruise cred. I've actually explored all 7 continents via cruise ship to such jaw-dropping destinations as Antarctica, Greenland, Patagonia, Great Barrier Reef, Morroco, Hokkaido, and other such places. I've also received what's called a bronze cruising on cruises. Yes. And there are some certificates of mine that are cute.
The medallion?
The medallion was from Holland America Line.
Wow.
Because, as I will explain, it's worth your interest to what I call stack on a particular cruise line, but we'll get into detail. And if you'd like to see, sometimes the cruise ships also give you what I call some nice little tokens where you've been, where there's no passport stamp that you can obtain. They honor you with some certificates, which I think is a nice touch. What I'm going to do then is tell you that I've done what I'd call the hard homework of traveling on these adventurous cruises. I'd say definitely my favorite has been Antarctica. Somebody mentioned that Antarctica was an itinerary that they're interested in. I'm going to use Antarctica as an example to show the techniques that you can use to search for any cruise. Now, I will say before anything else that none of the companies that I mentioned are sponsoring me. I'm not affiliated with them. Treat me like a review website. I'm just basically giving my opinion as a frequent medaled cruiser about what I've experienced. In my opinion, despite the fact that I've had some issues with maintenance on the Holland ships, I would say for adventure cruises, that Holland America Line is the one that provides the best value. Now, since that's the case, what I'm going to do is show you some interesting functions on the Holland website that I think you can use to give you an idea of what kind of adventurous cruises we can go on. So, Holland America is easy enough to find. It's just hollandamerica.com. And when we're planning where to go, you can click on Find a Cruise. Now I want you to go to Filters because this is an important one. I like to use the function called Ports of Call because this is going to give you an idea of what you can go on, what kind of adventure yourself. If you're thinking, boring Alaska, let's take a look at some places we could explore. How about the Ivory Coast, the west coast of Africa?
That's a weird spot. I've been to Ivory Coast.
But let's say you do want to go to the Ivory Coast, and you click on the filter.
That's what I was wondering.
So, for example, they have one that goes all over, circumnavigates Africa. And you have some places that include the Ivory Coast, you have South Africa, you have Zanzibar, Tanzania. So I'm showing you this. For now, ignore the prices because I'm teaching you the search methods to find out what the adventurous cruises are. And this is an example to show you that there are so many more options than people think about. See, UAE, Morocco. Let's just go down the list a little bit. French Guiana, Iceland, Cape Horn, Mount Air, Philippines, Guatemala. I'm sure some of you are surprised. What? I thought cruise ships only go to Alaska. They go all around the world. They go all around the world, and I would say that chances are any country that you want to visit, especially if it's, you probably will find something. Now, because people were interested in Antarctica, what I'm going to do is use Antarctica as an example to compare itineraries. Let's say port of call. There's some South America and itinerary, which is an example of, for those of you interested in the beauty In 2015, only 2 major lines went to Holland America and Celebrity. Has now re-entered the market. A very competitive. We're going to look into that itinerary in a second using a different search technique as an example of offers. We'll go to list view. Sometimes that's a little easier to take a look. This one starts in Buenos Aires, goes to Montevideo in Uruguay, some other ports in Argentina. Now, one thing to note about Antarctica is that they do not do a landing on the continent proper, as in the continent part that has no permanent population and only research bases. But what they do in terms of a landing is they go to what they call their Antarctica substitute. Many insurance companies consider Falkland Islands as part of Antarctica, so this is your landing. In other situations, sometimes they offer what they call airplane landings from Ushuaia while you're in port. Yeah. The problem though with Antarctica, and I'll be fully transparent with this part, is I would say from a weather point of view, it is the riskiest itinerary you can go on. Not that it's unsafe, it's that you might risk not seeing anything. I went on what I would consider the luckiest itinerary ever, because the captain told us such. He said in 20 years of captaining through Antarctica, this is the best weather he's ever seen. We had clear views of everything, glaciers, animals, and I will show you some right now. This is also my way of advertising my YouTube, which many of you know is called The Horley Virgin, yes. And for those of you who are too polite to 35-year-old virgin, no virgin who regrets everything in life and is not living life to the fullest, I'm very happy and adventurous. And this is of what you might see in Antarctica.
Is this from the ship?
Yep.
What did you shoot that with?
We shot that with a point and shoot at this time, I think, but the quality came out really well. Yeah. An example, and here's some examples of animals you might see. Yeah.
Who's shouting?
What is it? A whale?
Yeah, that one's a whale. We have some Chinese commentary courtesy of whoever was standing next to me at the time.
You know how to edit these all together into one video?
Yeah, I would, but I haven't had time to.
There used to be a function on YouTube itself. They took it away. They dropped it. You used to be able to do that right on YouTube.
Or could happen is what happened on the itinerary immediate after me, which is they could not land in Port Stanley to see penguins inland. I don't have a video of that, but I did see rockhopper penguins and king penguins in Port Stanley in the Falkland Islands, which is the Antarctic landing. They missed that. They saw none of the glaciers, none of the beautiful landscapes, and it was basically fogged out for the 5 days that they were in Antarctica. This is something that you have to be aware of because it's the only itinerary that I would say is very weather sensitive, and you might spend a lot of money to not see anything. That's why for a lot of the Antarctica float plane landings that they do, they also tell you that there's a 50% chance that weather will cancel it, and if that happens, we are at leisure to substitute whatever we consider an equivalent value. I will tell you whatever they have offered has never been equivalent to an Antarctic landing. Sometimes they'll just take you to something close by. So that's the big risk with the Antarctica itinerary. But if it's something that you're still interested in taking a look at, you can take a look at another search engine. Now, this is something that I discovered just by playing around, and I use it a lot because I'm a country collector. what many of these cruise lines do is they have a whole list of ports of call. But what if you are more, I want to see a specific place or a specific country? The best way I found to aggregate all of the cruises that go to a specific place is to type literally the word cruise compete as all one word, and then type wherever you want to go. For example, cruise complete Antarctica, and then it will pop up all the cruises that go to Antarctica.
Oh, there's a website called Cruise Compete.
Yeah, there is a website called Cruise Compete, but for some reason, I found it easier to do the search the way I did, type it right into the bar, and it does all this aggregation. Maybe the website itself has a search function where you could do this, but I've never gone to the effort to find it because I know how to do it myself. So you'll see that actually there's a number of different places that go down to Antarctica, but I would say a lot of them are more expensive. The three that I would target for cheap deals would be number 1, Holland America, and then 2 and 3, Princess and Celebrity. Now Princess, this is a new itinerary that they did not have available. Princess used to sail to Antarctic, and the Antarctic...
Full screen on that? So
yeah. Is it? Oh, it's this side, right? Yeah, there we go. There we go. So this one has maybe a couple more sea days, and they go to some places in the Caribbean. So if you want a bit of a mix, go up to the Caribbean. You have Brazil, you have Argentina,
that's Uruguay,
and Uruguay, and you also go to Stanley and Arctic Peninsula. So this is an interesting itinerary as well. Now, is there any place else that people want to go to that we can do a quick cruise?
Galapagos.
Okay, let's go. Galapagos. Go like that. There we go. Galapagos Islands. So I always say there's a difference between Galapagos Island departures and Galapagos cruises. The cruises will include any place that either departs or starts from it, whereas departures would only include places that depart from the Galapagos. Some people want to start somewhere else but want to include Galapagos. So this is the one that includes the Galapagos. Let's take a look here. Oh, we have some from Celebrity. Let's see, 10 night from Quito.
What do they charge?
So this particular website I've used, and it's a quoting system.
Yeah.
What you would do is you would join for free, and let's see if they would allow me to do it. How it works. Yeah. So basically, you just request quotes, and people have an incentive, obviously, of quoting you the lowest price possible. My last 2 cruises, I actually went through Cruise Compete, and it's worked out well.
I think you got a good deal?
I'd say I did. That's why I say ignore the ticket prices that you see, because if you were to go by what you see, especially in the 90-day payment period, then you're probably going to get sticker shock and push it away and say, no, it's too expensive. Although cruise lines have been changing the way they price things, I would say a good rule of thumb to use is if you are the type of person who can pull a trip together in 3 months on 3 months notice, that you're probably best off to wait until the cruises go into what's called final payment. What happens is the cruises, they're selling these cruises years out, and they always try to convince you to as possible.
Yeah.
What they do is they have what's called a final payment date, where up to that date, if something happens, whatever money or deposit that you've put back, if you decide to cancel the cruise for a specific date, usually around 3 or 4 months before the cruise is sailing, they have to refund you all your money. That means after that date, people start getting into cancellation penalties, and the cruise line has an accurate picture of who's actually going to be attending the cruise now. So they know, oh shit, this one's only 25% capacity. Then they go on fire sale. Some cruise lines have tried to counter this by trying to offer what they say are going to be the best deals ever if you book earlier. I've played with it on both ends. I would say that really depends on the itinerary, and that depends on the capacity of the ship. There have been some where I took a chance and then the price went up during the final payment period. So then this is where I say, in order to have the best deals, you probably want some flexibility. When I was first starting cruising and doing all of this adventure travel 5 years ago, I hadn't been anywhere that major, so I thought, I'll just follow the deals. The first cruise I went on was a Panama Canal cruise that started in Vancouver, went down all coast of the US, touched Mexico, Costa Rica, Panama. I visited a native Embera village, which is the native people of Panama. They've largely kept their way of life living off the land, and the only thing they've done is to upgrade into what they call electric dugout canoes, because people were coming from cruise ports, and if they were to just rely on the rowing that they used to do, it was eating up a lot of time. You can have a lot of adventurous activity on something like that. And there are so many cruises that even connect through Vancouver Port that don't include Alaska, or include Alaska as what I would call a freebie. The second cruise I went on, I started in Japan and went up the coast of Japan in Hokkaido and repositioned the ship across the Arctic, and they included the Alaska as basically for free for the price that you would get. That's a good tip to know, is a lot of the adventurous cruises are actually what are called repositioning cruises. For example, we have major zones in the world where you have cruise industry. Vancouver is an amazing example of Alaska for a specific time of the year. Then they can't keep the ship there because Alaska's done for the season. So sometime in September, October, they're going to start moving all those ships for the Caribbean season. Now, they could do two things. One, they could just say, okay, we'll drive the ship over to the Caribbean, an empty ship, and reposition it. Or, they're smart enough to know, how about let's make an itinerary out of it? And because repositioning can sometimes have more sea days than port days, we're just going to severely discount the prices and see who's interested. Many times for the repositioning itineraries, you'll find that they go to places that they actually don't normally go to. For example, a full transit of the Panama Canal usually only happens with a repositioning. If you go on a normal, for example, Pacific Northwest or Baja California cruise, what they might do is a partial transit. They go halfway and they come back. To do a full Panama Canal transit, you'd have to go on a positioning that brings the ship all the way to the Caribbean. The same thing happened with the most recent cruise that I was on. They were finishing up the Mediterranean season, and they wanted to now move the ship back over to the US. So what they did was they did all of Scandinavia, across the Arctic, touching Iceland and Greenland, and then landing in New York. The interesting thing about Iceland is I know many people are interested in Iceland, and a recent tragic thing happened, which is the dissolution of WOW Air, which is the budget travel airline. They've said that Iceland is predicted to hit a recession because that travel budget airline was help feeding the travel industry there. As much as many people have flown into Iceland, I would actually recommend a cruise ship. The reason why is because Iceland, to enter the ports, there are beautiful glaciers and fjords that are part of the character of Iceland, and the only way you can see them is by cruise to go through what you would call those beautiful landmarks. For me, seeing Iceland that way is a very efficient way to go. Some other cruises, like you've seen, pretty much anything that you think probably exists. Now that we've taken a look at some of what you would call the adventurous itineraries, we can start to interleave pricing into this. So it's always a balance between adventure and price. For me, I'm flexible with my schedule, and I know that I can put a trip together within 3 months of the payment date. Each individual is going to have to assess in their own situation how they want to deal with things. Perhaps you want the adventure, but you need a little bit more time and leeway. Then what I would suggest in any case is that if you have an idea of which cruise you want, you're going to want to start price comparing. Or if you actually want to just take a look at cruises that are already cheap and discounted and see whether that fits your adventurous lifestyle, you can go that way as well. Some of the search engines I use, you might have heard of, which is it's vacationstogo.com. They have what's called the 90-day ticker, so this is perfect. They're basically telling you which of the cruises are in that final payment date, and you can take a look at some of the percentages off that they say. Anywhere from 70s on up.
It's huge.
Sometimes knowing what season to go is important too. I know that a lot of people, for example, as much as we say Alaska is boring, I've been there. It's still beautiful and worth going if you can pick up a cheap cruise. Many people like to go in June, July, September, right now. But I would say wait beginning and end of season. I went beginning of season in April on that repositioning cruise from Japan, and I was actually able to see a lot of the things that are normally melted were still glazed over, like Mendenhall Glacier was fully iced and I could walk on it, versus if you were to go when it's the summer season, a lot of it's melted away. You see a completely different side. I would say because we're Canadian and we're used to cold weather, if you're comfortable with Vancouver or slightly colder weather, you can probably see a lot of different things. What they consider to be off-season, there's actually a lot of beautiful things to see in different places around the world. Now, of course, there are tropical places like the Galapagos, which will always have the same kind of temperature, but there are places like Alaska where end and beginning of season, you will actually, in my opinion, see more, and it's cheaper. So we have...
So what's the price is that for, like, what are the prices? Is that like for one room or something?
What we'll do is we'll click in and we'll, for example, take the first one.
Brochures.
This is where you have to be careful about reading what they say.
Right.
So let's take a look. What do they say about these prices? Prices are in US dollars per person based on double occupancy. Prices are subject to change without notice by cruise lines until a deposit has been made and must be reconfirmed at the time of booking. Prices include port charges but do not include airfare where applicable, airport or government taxes or fees. Prices and promotions are for new bookings only in accordance with cruise line policies. Click any price to convert to other currencies. As much as I hope that all of the cruise search engines would have consistency, they're just like the airline aggregators. Some airline aggregators have gone with full transparency, including all prices so that this is the final price you'll pay. Some are still lagging behind and extracting things out and that you have to click multiple times before you have a final price. Vacations to Go has gone back and forth depending on how, I guess, maybe the cruise line represents the pricing, but I have found myself inconsistencies with pricing. So sometimes what I've done is I've done analytics on these numbers. Like I'll just basically export all these numbers into an Excel spreadsheet and do analytics on it. For example, dividing the price by night so that you can get a per day amount. I actually use what I call a different metric. I don't do price per night. I do price per adventure night. I'm not on a cruise for sea days. That's my mentality. Some people are, and that's something that they're willing to factor into their pricing. Some people aren't, like me. I've actually changed my mind a little bit with the amount of adventure cruising I've done, that a cruise day or sea day here or there is actually worth it. But generally speaking, what I do is I would take a look at this particular itinerary, and instead of looking at how many nights, I would actually look at how many places I'm going to. This one probably ends up being about similar because, as you see, there are no sea days in there, so the amount would be the same. But let's take a look at another itinerary where it could massively change how you think about the cruise. This again is about you knowing what you want. I myself am here for ports, and for me, adventurous ports are what I'm looking for. Some people are looking for something completely different, and then we would have to assess according to what you want. For example, I'll just click this Shanghai. Okay. You actually have 2 sea days among a 6-day cruise. So for me, maybe price, if you divide that like 900 by 4 is a little less attractive to me than 900 divided by 6. But
depending on what it is.
Depending on what you want.
Yeah, and where it is.
And where it is. Well, this is something where you have to ask yourself, what do you want to accomplish on the cruise? I will say that the industry is mostly cleft into 2 categories. The reason why Holland, I feel, provides the best value on adventure cruises is because they've made a calculated business decision. They've said, our ships, while reasonable, are more basic amenities. You'll still have a show at night, you'll still have some cocktail lounges, you'll still have some live entertainment. But Holland ships are nothing like some of the mega ships you've heard about. Royal Caribbean has circus school, has an amusement park, has a surf simulator, has a scoping eye that goes out across the ocean and comes back. Almost like a little elevator arm. These things all cost money. Maybe those things are useful if you have a family, kids need to be distracted on sea days. I would say, because I've cruised a lot, and I've also talked to people who've cruised on many of the different cruise lines, if you're looking at your trip from an energy management standpoint, regardless of how fit you are, and I would consider myself a relatively fit person, I personally do not think that I have the capacity to make use of all of those extra amenities even on sea days. If, let's say, you have an itinerary that has close to 75% of your days are spent in port, most likely you're going to want a rest day in between if you focus on doing all you can do in port. In that case, whether you want to spend all of that extra money on circus school that you probably won't go to, that's a decision you'll have to make. But just know that fancier the ship, the more you pay for it. Now, how has Holland been able to compete? They'll say, okay, we're not going to invest in the fancy ship or the circus school or the amusement park. We're going to have basic amenities, but we'll make it up in adventurous ports. So I have found that Holland has done the combination of basic ship adventure ports. I'd say someone like a Royal Caribbean is more on the other end, which is mega amusement amenity ship. I'd say ports that are less interesting to me. You'll have to make a decision on your own about what you value. And for some people, maybe they think that they have the energy to take advantage of everything, going to port and also taking advantage of the amenities on ship. Having been on a basic Holland ship, I will say to you that I've never felt bored myself. I think that what they offer in terms of their entertainment is enough. You'll have a show per night. You'll have different activity groups, arts and crafts, a library, and I think it's actually nice to have those Netflix and chill days. They have upgraded their system to have a number of movies available, and I think for myself, my mom who's older, and my brother who's younger, we've all found that we've been able to keep ourselves entertained on the Holland ships. They still offer what I would consider around a 3-star level of hotel service in terms of the room that you have. So that has been something that they've improved over time. Before, the issues that I had with them were majorly due to maintenance. They've since updated their fleet. That's also affected the pricing a little bit. When they're updating their fleet prices, they're trying different pricing schemes, but I've still found that with most of the itineraries, if you're in a flexible state of mind and you're watching them, the 90-day ticker is something that you want to think about. With respect to the 90-day ticker, what I often combine it with is another website called Cruise Sheet. With this one, like I've said, you can actually export all this data to Excel and do a calculation of price divided by nights as just a rough factor. So for example, I've told people that I myself set a budget of 50 to 100 per adventure day per person. Rough order of magnitude. That to me is a good deal. Anything above that, I usually select out right away. That's meant that sometimes I completely change my plan. The cruise that I went on last, which was a repositioning through Greenland and Iceland, that was a cruise that my brother had sort of thrown out the idea of a whole year earlier. That year earlier, I tried to use this 90-day method. That gamble didn't work out for me. It sold out and it became more expensive. Knowing that, because I watched the trend, I said, I'm going to get ahead of it this time and see for this particular route if that works. So the next year, I did the completely opposite approach. I booked through Cruise Compete as early as I could. I think I did 9 months in advance, which for me is a lot. I know some people might think that sounds about average, but for someone who's used to doing things within a 3-month time window, 9 was quite a lot. That ended up being the right gamble because, again, that cruise sold out completely, and I took the last triple room. I know Anthony was asking me a question regarding single supplements. This is where Anthony has some choices, but I would say he's more limited. Norwegian Cruise Lines has come up with a new technique which is called the single rooms. They've basically taken what used to be double rooms and they just split them in half. On average, you're still going to pay a little bit more than if you were in a double occupancy, but you're not going to pay double, so that's great. A lot of the times with these cruise lines, when you were paying a single supplement, you were basically, as a single person, paying out for the whole room. Some cruise lines like Holland, they'll say, we'll do a buddy system and match you up, but that's not guaranteed. So I would say for affordable cruises, if you're traveling solo, Norwegian is probably your best bet. I would say though, if you have some people around you who also like cruising, the magic number is 3. I travel with my mom and brother, and because we've loyalty on the cruise lines as well, which is the concept of stacking, the third person essentially travels for free. The reason why is they have some rooms that are technically double occupancy, but they've recoded it to meet the fire and safety regulations, and they've added a bed that usually is either flipping out from the couch, or it might be against a wall that flips down. That means if you're 3 people sharing the room, you'll probably have less space than if you were 2 people sharing that same space. So they compensate you by saying, okay, the third person is free. The reason why I say 3 people is the magic number is because 3 is the reasonable way to scale up a double room without them incurring too much extra costs. As soon as you try to add a 4th bed or even a 5th bed, they're getting into rooms that are physically bigger than a double occupancy room. So you might find difficulty having rooms like that. But that being said, if your party is 4 or 5 people and you have a family, try to fit in as many people in the room as possible. Another thing that, aside from taking a look at some of these cruise aggregators where you can get a general sense of what's going on sale, is what we would call insider deals. So insider deals is someone like me. I've cruised on the line before, so they give access to discounts for people who have already cruised because they want you to come back for more. This brings up an obvious problem. Well, what if you don't want to spend money to become an insider? One way that you can do it is that we're lucky in Vancouver. They have these events called open ship events. I'm just going to go to Eventbrite and show you an example. I've been on an open ship event before, where what they do is they open a ship up for a day for locals to just come on board, but they do a really amazing thing. They treat you like an insider. So they'll compliment your lunch for you, usually, and then they'll say, for today, we're going to treat you like you're an insider. You're going to get access to the special pricing. You're going to get access to the future cruise visits if you commit to something today. And by something, it depends on the line. I went to an open Princess cruise ship, and Princess back then, was exceedingly generous. Maybe because I cruised so much, they comped it so it was free. They included lunch, and they allowed me to buy future cruise deposits, where usually you would have to have gone on a cruise before you can do that. But I guess they treat you as going on a to nowhere cruise. So I was able to access the Princess Cruise Insider without ever having to go to a cruise at all. Now, what you would do is, we're not looking for Alberta, we're looking for, let's say, Richmond. I want you to type cruise ship tour.
Does it matter that it says Alberta?
Still Alberta.
Is it still Alberta?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We'll say Richmond, BC. There we go. Okay. Now I know that for some places, they've started charging a nominal fee, like let's say here, Norwegian. If you were interested as a single person, taking a look, what's Norwegian all about? They're going to be docking the ship on August 26th. They're going to charge you a nominal $10, but they do include, if I remember, lunch for you. So you can then test out the food. Some people, I know, as much as you say, I don't want to gain the weight, you probably do want to at least sample some of the delicacies that they have on board. And one way to try out the experience without committing to a cruise is to go on one of these ship tours. In these ship tours, you can see that they have a special insider of those who book on the event will receive $50 onboard credit. This depends on the cruise line, so this is what they allow you to have access to. Maybe when you get on the ship, they'll actually give you access to the full insider range, like Princess did. Maybe when you get on the ship, it'll be something else. But at the very least, for people who maybe have never cruised before and don't want to make that commitment yet, they want to see the ship, they want to tour the ship, what are they doing? You're going to arrive at 10:45. They're going to show you the cabins. They're going to feed you. They're going to show you the public areas, and then have some time for you to ask questions. This is a low risk way for you to have an enjoyable day on a ship, and just take a look at what that cruise line's all about. Norwegian's having one coming up. Seabourn's having one. Azamara's having one. So you have a couple. Yeah. So Seabourn and Azamara are usually considered more of the luxury lines. But hey, for $20, if they're going to give you lunch, Azamara is even sold out. So this is a way for you to take a look at the different cruise lines and see what they have to offer. This is an interesting situation because before I had been fully committed on Holland, but I also wanted access to some of the different cruise lines to see what the deals would be. I'd always been told that, for example, a Princess ship had more amenities than a Holland ship, but when I boarded the Princess ship, I saw it mostly be similar. So sometimes, as much as you hear other people's experiences about the cruise ship, I think this is a really affordable, low-risk way for you to really see if you match with that vibe. The ship. Maybe if you go on the ship, it'll be like, yeah, the food was maybe so-so, or you really liked it, you really liked the common areas, you liked the cabins. You could even go to a couple of them and just treat it as an interesting day out.
Research.
Yeah, research. So I guess we'll take the quick break now.
Okay, sure. Everyone, if you need to use the washroom, it's just right here. So we'll take a quick 5 to 10 minute break, and then we'll resume afterwards. Yes.
Is the Norwegian one sold out?
The Norwegian one seems to be still okay.
Can't find it. No.
You can't find it? It's on Eventbrite.
Yeah.
And just search cruise ship tour Richmond.
Is that they don't do tours in other parts of Vancouver? Is that why? Or
what they do is this is something that's according to the ship and also the port authority. So when you enter these ships, you actually have to provide your full passport and photo ID because they are treating you like you're a guest on board.
Yeah.
That's often why they also use that little loophole. You're basically taking a cruise to nowhere, but you've boarded the ship. You're in their system already. So they will often consider you like an insider. You'll have access to those insider deals. But that, again, depends on the ship. I mean, some of them might be like, okay, we're only going to offer you this particular kind of deal. But in any case, this is a good way for you to sort of test out the cruise ship to see if that's something that you want to do. Maybe you'll go on one of these and you'll be like, yeah, you know, not really my thing. Maybe you'll go on one of them and say, oh, this really is my thing. So this is a really affordable, low-risk way of assessing whether you and that ship will dive. Yeah.
Living downtown, I want to know, do they have things like last minute boarding?
This one is a tricky one. I think it would depend a lot on whether it goes through the US. If it goes through the US, like for example, goes down the Pacific Northwest, something like that, chances are lower. If you're talking about boarding, I would give yourself a window of a port and just board. I believe are largely over because of the security precautions. That being said though, if you monitor online or you're checking to ask that they still have availability, you could probably pick up something a couple days before sail. I would say though, if you live downtown, you might be able to try going to the port and asking about. Yeah, you could. This is just like people who
I'm going.
Like a bus.
Do wait lists on airfares. Like for people who have people, exactly. They take risks. I think some people have even said that they fly all the way down to Florida to do this. I would say it's only if you live in Vancouver near a port that you might want to try. If you're okay spending the day waiting and being told no, that's cool. Otherwise, if you're going to fly somewhere on the off chance that you might get a deal, that's for yourself. That's
so you have to just search
online. For me personally, because I live in Richmond, I don't have the luxury of doing that.
So there's no registration system?
Not that I know of for last minute cruises.
Okay.
You'd probably have to know someone and be brought on as their guest or like a standby. I know that people who work on cruise lines have a different boarding system. I wish Jen had come because she used to work on cruise lines. She could have given an additional perspective. She had registered to come. But in any case, maybe next time if you guys run into Jen, who's another regular presenter here, she can help clarify that part for you. Water as well. Anyways, while I'm waiting, I guess if any questions, we can fit in a bit of Q&A.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
We've traveled on Holland several times. Always on repositioning cruises.
Yes, nice.
And I have found that sometimes the mattresses or beds are extremely uncomfortable. What do you suggest in terms of things like that? You know, I've asked for a different mattress, and they've said, "Oh, we don't have any on board, or none on this floor, or whatever." What do you suggest?
Is it too hard or too soft?
Lumpy.
Now, this is a backpacking trick that I use, and this is something that you could consider. Maybe to bring your own foam top, or even a sleeping bag. That's a backpacking rule. I know with Holland, I've also had my issues with their maintenance in their rooms. Oftentimes, I will give them the benefit of the doubt that they try their best to do what they can, but they can't always accommodate every situation that comes up. So sometimes you will have to have your own solutions. I would say bringing your own foam roll-up. I think they have some that are quite compact nowadays. If you go to a place called MEC, so Mountain Equipment Co., and there's actually another one, I really should find the address that I walked by that's a travel shop. They have all manners of interesting, odd types of things that you can bring on trips that help you have more comfort.
There used to be one on 4th called the Travel Bug.
Maybe that's the one
but I don't know.
I bought recently. Thermal blanket that's basically just an aluminum sheet sort of thing, but it's like that thin. It's so thin, and it only costs $2. I also bought a mosquito net for your head, and I'd never seen that before. I would have probably liked to use that in Africa when I was in, but I was lucky the season that I went last year, I was pretty much okay. One person on our safari trip did contract malaria, but then she also did not take anti-malarials. So that's something that you have to consider.
I recommend bringing masking tape for those air conditioners.
Oh, yes.
If you get a sore neck, if you're sitting in a certain place, you can at least mask off that part of the air conditioner.
Yeah. Or in a cruise ship, you can ask them to turn
it down, but then the whole room gets hot.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yes.
So you can just cut out the one blowing at you.
That's true, yes. So there are many different techniques. especially if you're going to be on the ship for a long time. I've been on ships usually a bare minimum 14 days per cruise, averaging about 30 days, so I go on long ones. That's another tip for you, that you can save a lot of money, economies of scale. The longer the trip you go, usually the cheaper it becomes. You can do a couple things to combine the trips together, either beforehand or even while you're on. I've met people before who, when you're on the ship, then continuing is easier. If you're not on the ship yet, that's where you have problems because of all of the paperwork. But once you're on the ship and they have a record of you, if you want to extend or continue, you can do that. The man that I met in Antarctica, he went on that same itinerary back and forth 3 times because he felt like doing it. So, yeah, he had recently come into some money from an inheritance, so that was the decision that he made.
Wow. Must have loved it. It'd be amazing to see it. You get fed.
Just keep going.
Just keep going.
Keep going, yeah.
Your visa won't catch up.
Sorry, we're leaving. Port of call.
You know, it's been said that cruise ships are cheaper than nursing homes, eh?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Or living there full time, I heard.
Yeah, you can live full time on a cruise ship. It's cheaper than living in a nursing home.
Sad commentary.
Yeah, you got a pension, just to spend all your retirement on cruise ships.
Yeah.
It's more interesting.
Traveling the world.
Yeah.
What was the name of that store that she mentioned where you could
Travel
visit?
Bug.
Travel Bug?
Yeah.
Travel Bug, I think.
I wonder
I
where
don't know if it's still there.
Yeah.
But I think they're on. I think they're still on maybe Broadway or West 4th.
West 4th at
They used to be on Kids, yeah. They used to be in Kids, yeah.
But that, it's changing so much. We don't go there.
In the
So.
Arbutus area, close to Arbutus.
What were you saying about single supplements?
Okay.
You said something earlier?
Yes. Unfortunately for you, the cruise industry is still mostly designed for double occupancy. But the cruise line that you can consider is Norwegian.
Yeah, I heard that.
For affordable cruises, they have designed single rooms for people.
Yeah.
And you probably won't pay double divided by 2, but you're not going to pay double as well.
Yeah.
So you're probably going to pay a little bit, but at least that's an option for you.
Yeah, I actually heard about the Norwegian deal.
Yeah. Another option for you is if there's an itinerary that you really like, you can call the cruise line and ask if they're willing to pair you with a buddy. Now, cruise lines are very finicky about this. Yeah. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. This is very different from, let's say, Tour Radar, where you do land tours, and they basically have everybody pays just the price. There's no such thing as a single supplement. When I backpacked through Africa, that was exactly what I did. No single supplements, because they know that the nature of the trip is tough for people to find roommates, as you will.
Yeah.
And in any case, you're camping anyways, so it's just about having 1 or 2 people setting up a camp. They provide all the equipment for you.
Just a question about timing. So you said that once you get, is it 90 days before the departure? That's when the sales start, if there's vacancies? Or...
Yes, so that's why I say the 90-day ticker is a good rule of thumb to follow, because they've already aggregated, I would say, even just a subset of all of the cruises that are within payment. This has selected out the ones that are on super deal, I guess you could call it. If you take a look at all of the percentages, you see everything is 50 and above for savings. The other search engine I'd like to use is Cruise Sheet, and the reason why I like to use it...
Are we starting again?
Oh, sure, yes. Okay. I guess we'll start again.
All right, everyone, we're gonna start again.
Yes.
Okay.
Our Q&A led into a session. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So what I like about this other website called Cruise Sheet is, if you're thinking, okay, exporting all of this to Excel is a little bit too much work, Cruise Sheet has a search option where you can enter your budget per day. So as you can see, I mean, they've entered something ridiculous like 1,300 per day. We're gonna take it right down. So let's say 100. Okay, let's say anywhere from 40 to 100. And you start searching. They will tell you the price and the cost per day. Again, different people use different metrics. I use cost per adventure day. Some people use cost per day. Some people use total cost. That depends on what you're looking for. if we were to look at, for example, this cruise, because it's the first one, I again would consider how many days I'm actually spending in port. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So instead of dividing, say, 900 by 20, I'm dividing 900 by 11. So this one is, as much as they say it's 44 per day, to me it's 100 per day. You know, that's something price-wise I would consider it, but because I've been to all these places already, I myself would select it out. That also depends on your own travel destination, what you want. When you're just starting out, the beautiful thing is that you'll be like, well, I've been nowhere anyway, so wherever works. The more you travel, like me, the more you're like, okay, I've been here before. Even if it's a good deal, it's not worth, for example, the flight costs. Cruise Sheet has a nice function that's called Price Alert. So what you would do is be the first to know if this cruise drops in price. Enter your email. So let's say for this first cruise, I want it to be 50 per adventure day. So I want it to go down half price. So I would just enter, you know, I want an email when it's $4.50, enter my email, and then it will do that for me. These are the two I would call major search engines that I use for research purposes. You can also book through them as online brokers. That will depend on a number of factors, which I'm going to talk about right now. Like anything, you can price shop, and that's where you're going to earn your big money. I've booked through a number of different online brokers, but I don't feel that I'm loyal to any of them. I'm basically loyal to whoever can offer me the best discount. So I will give you a list of a couple that I have used before, but I would say that research is your friend when you're doing this. One question I'm asked a lot is, how do I know that the online broker is legit? Anybody can make a website these days and have a search engine. If you're concerned, what you can do is you can call the original cruise line that is offering the cruise. For example, this one is being offered by Costa. Okay? If you come across a company called, let's say, cruisedirect.com. Now, I've used them before, so I know that they're legit. But let's say you don't know that. What you would do is you would call Costa Cruises direct line and ask them, Cruise Direct, 1-888-407, blah, blah, blah. Are they legit? And they will tell you, because the cruise lines have bulk discounts with many of these online brokers, but they're only able to offer the bulk discounts if the online broker is a legitimate broker. That means they have a full list of who their legitimate brokers are. If you call Costa and they say, we've never heard of XYZ cruises.com, then you probably want to think twice about giving them the money. Another way to ensure that you have an online broker, a dummy reservation through the cruise line directly. You just make a reservation. Usually the cruise line...
Did you say through the cruise line?
Through the cruise line first. And then what you do is you show as the best discount, the best rate. Then what you do is you move that reservation from the cruise line itself to the broker. That moving process, the cruise line has to ensure that they move it to a legitimate broker. They cannot move it to anybody. So that's another way to do it.
How do you move it from? How would you do that?
It's called moving a reservation. So this is something that agents don't always want you to know. But before your final payment date, remember that 90-day period, you're actually free to take your reservation and move it around to different brokers. The only thing that you're subject to is repricing every time you do it. So let's say I call it a dummy booking with the cruise line. We'll just say $500 was your cruise at the time. When you move the reservation to Agent A, they'll reprice it at whatever Agent A's price is, plus whatever perks Agent A can offer. For example, Cruise Direct, we're going to take a look at what they're offering right now. Okay. Do they have, let's just pick any random thing coming up. Let's go here. Let's just search. Now, you're going to see this exclusive onboard spend. From my experience in dealing with the cruise lines, usually the cruise line will offer not the most competitive rate. Depending on the arrangement with the broker, a broker might be able to have a cheaper price, or they might be able to give you onboard credit, or any other combination of perks, drink packages, room upgrades. That'll depend on the specific cruise, but I myself have never kept a reservation at the cruise line itself. If you ask them, do you match any of these online brokers? They'll say no because they don't match prices of outside. The only thing they'll do is they'll move your reservation to whatever agent is offering you the deal. I recommend doing that first for your peace of mind to know that you're transferring to a legitimate broker. But secondly, it's good to hold space, especially if this cruise is something that people are looking at, and you reserve space instead of waiting to figure out which online agent you're going to use. Maybe at the end of the day, you might decide you want to deal directly with the cruise lines. I will say that dealing with online agents can be tricky sometimes. If you deal direct with the cruise lines, if the price drops up to the final payment date, they'll honor those price drops, no questions asked. The only thing is that you might have to remind them because they have so many cruises going on, and they're probably hoping that you're not going to monitor the prices. But if you call them back and say, hey, your price has dropped, they'll price drop, no problems asked. When you go through online agents, in theory, they're supposed to honor price drops too, because technically the price drop's actually coming directly from the cruise line. But a lot of them hope that you don't know what you're doing, and they'll do a ton of stall tactics. So they might give you runaround. To be fair to them, maybe they don't even know themselves. But even when I've booked through an online agent, I've had price adjustments honored, even past payment date. Now, having them honored past payment date is a tricky one, because technically speaking, that's it. It's the final payment date. Everything that's on fire sale is fire sale. They don't want to have people waiting and taking advantage of the deals that way. But I would always say, if you ever see something better than what you have currently, it's always worth to ask, because even if they don't honor price drops, they might be able to upgrade you rooms, they might be able to offer you a beverage package. I've never had a situation where I saw a deal that was better than what I currently had, even if I was fully paid and past the payment date, and have the cruise line just say, you're on your own. Right. They've given me onboard credit. They've given me future cruise deposits. They've given me room upgrades. They've given me meal packages. So it's always worth checking. Just be aware, though, that sometimes people will be snippy about it. You know, companies don't always like that you're responsible for yourself and on top of it. They want sheeps and lemmings. It is what it is in life too, right? There's probably a ton of people that you've interacted with or who you know who probably wish you're not on top of things. Cruise Direct is one of the brokers that I've used. Another one that I've used is Cruise.com is another one I've used. And again, so for example, if you'll remember, Cruise Direct was offering up to $1,500 on board. Let's take a look at what Cruise.com is offering on some of them. Now this is just a generic search that we're doing. For example, they're offering up to $1,700 on board. Again, you have to read the fine print, because this is not that they're offering $1,700 on every cruise. It's on particular cruises, particular sail dates, particular criteria. That means that sometimes you're going to have to open up your browser and just maybe even search cheap cruises and see what comes up. There's a number. Vacations to Go, Kayak, Red Tag, Sell-Off Vacations, Expedia, iTravel 2000. You would just take your dream itinerary and search each one and see what they're offering. I gave you a bit of a shortcut to the ones that I've used before. But that being said, there are brokers coming online all the time, and maybe someone that you booked with this time cannot offer you onboard credit or whatever perks for another cruise, because different brokers also have familiarity with different lines. Different agents have their different specialties. So this is something where you can definitely save a lot of money, but you also have to, like everything else, invest some time into searching this. Because I cruise a lot, I take this as fun and part of the adventure. I also can impart knowledge on people. I've done a lot of the work already, so you can, if you feel, take a shortcut and say, you know, Stephanie's been on Cruise Direct. I'll just limit it to what Stephanie's been on. Cruise Direct, cruise.com. I've used Vacations to Go. I've used Cruise Compete. I've yet to use Cruise Sheet. I've used Travelocity. So if you want to use what I've used to limit your search, you're free to do that. The last thing we're going to spend time on is how to savor your time in port.
Just don't miss the boat.
What cruise ships will always try to tell you is that, you know, you're going to want to book through us on board, because otherwise, if the ship leaves without you, you're in trouble. Yeah. If you book on our onshore excursions, if things run behind time or schedule late, the cruise ship will always wait for you. That's true, but I would say not every cruise port you need to go through the cruise ship. I'm strategic. I will do it when it's not worth my time to plan my own day. Some of the ports that I have done through the cruise ship include Russia. Russia has what's called a 72-hour exemption for people who book through the cruise ship that you don't need a visa. So if you balance the fact that you don't have to buy a visa and you save time figuring out Russia's complicated, convoluted visa system, it's worth it because the price is still affordable, especially considering that you don't have to buy a separate visa.
Well, certain ports in Russia, like St. Petersburg, yeah, they give you a transit visa.
Yeah.
Anybody can get a transit visa. Yeah.
Another port that I've done was Port Stanley in Antarctica. That one is difficult to do on your own because the population is so low and all of the tours are going through private lands. So the tours are essentially organized through the cruise ships for ease of them and to control population numbers. I've known some people who tried to do their own thing in Antarctica and it was a mixed bag. Some people had great success and were able to see the penguin colonies on their own. Some people took a risk and were seeing nothing. So this is another thing where for some ports, if there's something you really want to see, if it's the highlight of your port, of your cruise, this particular port, I would say for those you probably want to go through the cruise line, unless there's something that you can organize yourself that the cruise ship can't. That happens sometimes. I've done that before myself. That's where you have to know for yourself what you want to do. The thing about these cruises is that you're going to have a lot of ports and a lot of things to choose from. For example, that Antarctica itinerary, you were going through Chile, you were going through Argentina, Uruguay. While I enjoyed those pieces of importance on them, so I was okay planning my own day thing. If you're deciding that you want to plan your own day trip, there are two things that you can do. I'll call it this website and your own port knowledge. So whatsimport.com is a good resource for you. You could just pick different ports and they'll give you a pretty good example of what you can do and see within a port day. Now, this is always good to check in advance so you know what you're doing. When you book the cruises, you can also check shore excursions ahead of time of what the cruise line offers. and you can book in advance. I would say of all the ports that I've been to, most of them are okay to wait to book on board if you don't want to book in advance, because sometimes they have onboard deals. The only exception would be in Antarctica. Those excursions go like hotcakes because there's limited supply. So if you want to foresee king penguins and the rock hoppers for sure, I would recommend that you book that before you even head onto the ship. And once you book, you'll have access to the cruise line's system where you can check in, print your e-docs and all of that, and you'll have a number of things that you can pre-purchase, packages, including short excursions. So it's always worth your time to invest and take a look at what you want to do. If you're more independent-minded, when you're in port, you can take a look at this website to give you an example of what a good day in port would look like. I would say though, because I've been cruising so much, there are very few ports that I even have an idea of what I want to go on per se. Like I would say it's a 50-50. Sometimes I decide on being adventurous, and instead of searching how to travel and do all of this stuff, I would have an idea of what I want as a rough itinerary, and I would just approach the local taxi system. Most of the ports that you're going to go to have integrated travel systems. As much as they don't want you to go with local operators, I have in all of my 120 plus days of traveling on a cruise and being in many ports, ever met any what I would call unscrupulous tour operator. First of all, they know that tourism is their bloodline, so they're not purposely trying to go out and give people poor experiences because they know that the word gets around. Secondly, there's even an additional layer of confidence that you can have for the tour operators local that have access to the port gangway. They have to pay extra fees and be licensed. If you're a little more adventurous, you can walk outside of the port and just see, hop on, hop off, see who's available. I would say that for most places, you could do a reasonable day tour and just tell the people what you want in a 3-person taxi for anywhere between 30 to 50 a person, and they will take you everywhere you want to go. The reason why I prefer to go with local operators that have their own transportation is because for some people in cruising, they're not used to the fact that you have 10 hours maybe in port. You have to be efficient to see what you want. So that is one of, I guess you'd call the drawbacks of going on cruises. In that case, point-to-point transportation makes the most sense. Some ports in Scandinavia, for example, that have good public transit, you could use that as well. Hop on, hop off is a good option as well. But if there's a specific thing that you want to see and you want to pack in as much as possible, I would say that the local operators are the best way to go. They have never been in a situation where they got me late on a cruise, so I've made every single port. Of course, there are some general tips that you want to follow for yourself. Maybe if they ask you when is the ship leaving, you want to tell them an hour in advance just to give yourself leeway space. I know that some people try to cut it really, really close. That's a risk management thing. That depends on what you want to do. Cruise ships can and will leave people, but I think it's less dramatic than people think. I've also had some cruise ship captains wait for independent travelers to come back, even if they weren't on a shore excursion. Generally speaking, I would say try to give yourself arriving back in port half an hour beforehand. If you are planning your own itinerary with a local operator, you probably want to still read this website to see what's available, or do your own research from TripAdvisor about what you want to see in port. If you're lucky, the cruise ship is going to be close enough to what you want to see on land. Close enough, I would consider anything within an hour of transportation close enough. There are going to be some that are advertised as a certain city, but are actually very far from the port. For example, Berlin.
Rome.
Yeah, Rome, 3 hours away. So that's where the obvious efficiencies of cruises can sometimes be tempered. As much as cruises are a good way, they're a very efficient way to get you to port, many of the ports will have things within walking distance or within reasonable transit. There are going to be some destinations that you're going to have to invest more time and have privates for. This is something that, again, you'll have to see whether it's what you want. Oftentimes, at the very least, you'll have the cruise ship has options for you to join their local tours. So if you, at the end of the day, you've taken a look at this website, you've maybe taken a look at some of the logistics, and you think, oh, for me to see, for example, the Berlin Wall, that's actually 3 hours away by transit, and that's my highlight of the trip, I want to pay for that assurance. Otherwise, most of the times, even for travel that was a bit away from the cruise port, I actually did it myself. Berlin Wall, we did by ourselves. Rotterdam to Amsterdam, we did by ourselves. The only ones I've done through the cruise ship are Russia and Antarctica, basically. Everything else I've found capable to do on my own, and I've been happy to do on my own. I would also say...
And how did you research the local operators to find out reviews or something?
This is something that's tricky. I've met people before who book with local operators before they land. I myself have never done that. The reason why I've chosen against it is because they often require payment in advance, and because you're still at the mercy of weather and cruise ship operation. Sometimes ports are missed, sometimes ports are substituted. I've heard that people have had difficulty obtaining their money back if the cruise ship made a change in itinerary. I would say, for the most part, the people that show up on the shore that are local operators at the time, I think are trustworthy enough to go on. So I myself have never booked in advance. That being said, you can book in advance with people. And I believe this website, depending on the port, gives you some examples. Okay, this one, maybe for this port, doesn't have. Another good forum to check out is called cruisecritic.com. Cruise Critic is where a number of people, let's choose some short excursions here. We'll have some city tours that you can book in advance. Viator is another good company to try. When you book in advance, you probably want to find a company that specializes in what's called shore excursions. There are companies that do multiple things, shore excursions, day tours, whatever. With shore excursions, you know that they have experience accommodating what a ship is in port. They'll have the scheduling of the ship, they'll know they've designed an itinerary that can fit. Otherwise, the people who are already at port are a good option for you. For example, you'll see actually through the Viator Combinator, they have a number of worthwhile activities that you can do. I myself, if I've ever booked in advance, have usually gone through Viator. But again, the whole idea of booking in advance or not, you'll have to weigh the pros and cons of each method. I myself have found what I call jumping on a local tour at the port has worked best for me. But that's also because I bring a lot of backpacking skills. I negotiate, I do all these things, and it comes second nature to me. My brother, who also travels with me, benefits from the fact that I do all of that, but he's less backpacking minded in a sense. Like, he often says, I'm paying to go on vacation. All of my price shopping I want to have done beforehand. And once I arrive, no more price shopping for me. So between him and I, we've developed a better system. He'll tap me on the shoulder if he thinks I'm going too far, like, okay, it's time to move on, or time to do something else. And then we go from there.
I sense you're fairly shrewd. A shrewd negotiator.
I am. This will bring up one thing that I talked about in my last lecture that I went into specific detail. I can go into specific detail with it if people are interested, but I will address the topic of gratuities and tipping on cruise ships because it's a hot topic.
Yes.
Anybody who knows me, as you see in Negotiation Shrewd, I don't pay tips ever in any circumstance in life. Cruise ships will often do what's called auto gratuities, where they have an amount that they pay per day that you're free to remove if you want or change. I always go to the front purser's desk, remove them, and that's that. My concept in life is that I don't tip. I can get into more of the philosophy behind it if anyone's interested, but that's the way I deal with it.
What do you tell the front desk?
They don't ask any questions because they're not technically supposed to. It's your choice because tips are optional. It is what it is. I guess this leads into sort of the philosophy of it. It's essentially the difference between what are you legally obligated to do and not. I'll give an example of a Coke can. If you buy a Coke can from Coke Company, you have a contract, you paid the $1, they gave you the can, you drank it, you're on your merry way, you've met your responsibility by paying the $1. Coke, on its end, has a ton of different contracts with vendors, employees, all these other people. Maybe the CEO of Coke decided to take the $1 you gave him, and he snorted real Coke up his nose, and then he didn't pay the aluminum can operator, he did not pay his employees. Legally, that can operator can't come to you as a customer and say, hey, Coke didn't pay their bill, you pay it now. No dice, man. Your contract is between Coke and you, not me. Similar with employees and other people, it's the cruise line's responsibility to pay their employees. The tips are optional. You're free to tip if you want to. If you don't, you just go to the front purser's desk and remove the tips. I have never been asked why. I have never given a reason why, and we all go on our merry way.
Before or after?
On Holland, you have to wait till the last day to remove it. You can ask them about the procedures in advance. On other cruise lines, sometimes you might have to obtain paperwork beforehand. But in any case, people ask me, how do you feel about maybe being labeled a mean and cheap person? I say, I am happily a mean and cheap person. Another example I give is I have a family member who's very close to me. I don't give people family friends or family money. He had 3 kids that he couldn't afford because he had unprotected sex. I've interacted with these kids. I think they're really great kids. In my form, I probably love them. They're the closest kids. If anyone were to ask me, what kids do you care about the most? Probably would be them. I still haven't given a single penny to their child support. I haven't done so because they're not my legal responsibility. I didn't have unprotected sex, so that's that. The flip side, though, is we've talked a lot about maybe what's not your legal responsibility, but then what is your legal responsibility? So when I was an employee, I wasn't the type of person who just sat there and accepted whatever the company told me. I negotiated my salary, I negotiated my work conditions, and if we couldn't come to something that was mutually acceptable, I walked. And if I'm going to translate that to a greater life goal, and this is probably a good sentiment to end on, it's, I would say, maybe take some time to do some thought experiments on what you truly feel responsible for in life. Because a lot of people also outsource their happiness to other people. And this is where I would say, I think your happiness is your own responsibility. It's not your kid's responsibility, it's not your husband, not your wife. I'm easy because I'm single and I don't want a family, so maybe that's an easy thing for me to say. But when I talk about concepts of responsibility, I'm not saying that I don't take them and I also don't own up to the responsibilities I have. I pay Holland what they tell me to pay. I pay Coke Can Company what their pricing is, and then I leave it at that. I don't take it upon myself to audit whether they're doing the right thing on their end. I don't have the time or energy, and I just let the legal system take care of it. My rule of thumb is, if you can sue me, or if I can go to jail because I didn't pay you, then I owe you a legal responsibility. If you can't sue me, and I can't go to jail for not paying you, then I don't owe you anything. And anything on top of that is your own discretion. If you want to help pay child support for other people, that's fair for you. If you want, I've made a choice not to do that, and I'm comfortable with it. That also says, to bring back to your grand masterpiece about your life, I found that the thing that's made me happiest in the world is to go through every single circumstance that we encounter in life and to critically ask myself, what am I trying to accomplish and what do I reasonably think I'm responsible for? If you make that mental shift more so about the happiness that you think that your responsibility for your own happiness, I think you will look at life in a different way. Maybe that'll help your masterpiece along. In any case, though, those are just my opinions. Everyone's free to do what they want to do. I usually try to take morality judgments out of it. I like to keep money separate from goodness and kindness. That being said, though, I'm also comfortable with labels, so if people think I'm cheap and mean, I'm also cool with that as well. But that's, again, comes from the self-confidence of knowing yourself and what you're standing for and what your values are. And if you have gone through a critical analysis and you think differently, that's great. But that also gives you the confidence to do the actions that you think are in line with your values. Because for a lot of the people that I've seen who are unhappy, it's because their actions don't match their values. And it doesn't have to do with tipping in particular. It could be anything. It could be that you start thinking, well, I'm tipping these people, but I'm not helping out my brother who needs financial help. Well, I only have $10 to help people out in optional money, so maybe I shouldn't be tipping and I should be helping my brother. Or you think your brother's a huge jerk and he doesn't deserve your help and you want to tip people. Or maybe you want to buy bed nets for kids in Africa and you don't want to help anyone out. This is a choice that you make, and if you go through what your values are, you're going to start learning about where you want to place your efforts, and hopefully that's I guess you could call it more of a philosophical way of looking at life that can help you out. The traveling, as I've said often, is a component of life. For some people, it's the major component, like me. Traveling, interacting with animals, a major component of my life. But for a lot of people, I think what holds them back from starting to travel is they have a lot of other things going on that they either don't want to look at or are afraid to look at. I would say I was there before, and it might be scary at first, but the freedom you'll feel when you've done all of that is something that I think even the traveling can't give you. So that's my life advice to end off our presentation. Anybody have any more Q&A?
Where do you eat and still get good service?
Well, I actually don't eat out too much anymore, to be completely honest. I just eat takeout food mostly. I avoid all of that. Just a side note for people who are curious, like the US is a big example of tipping waiters and waitresses. I know very few people know this, or maybe they know this and don't want to tell people, but tippers are, servers are always going to be paid the minimum federal wage. If they aren't tipped enough to make the minimum federal wage, their employer is legally required to top up. So the only difference is who's paying. Is it going to be you or the employer? I'd say, how about the guy who's legally responsible? That's how I say it. So a lot of people are going to use guilt trips and tactics, but that's just like anything else in life. You probably have a friend of yours who's always trying to ask you for money and all of that. Maybe you feel like his friendship's worth it and you want to continue, or maybe you don't. So that's the question that you have to ask yourself. I myself have never encountered problems from not tipping, but that could be said that reputation-wise I might suffer. But if that's the case, I haven't cared enough to know. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What about the number of cruise nights you've cruised in, say, on Holland, and you're looking for a discount on Princess? Will they take that into account, or?
No, and that brings up a good point because Carnival is the mother company of both Holland, Princess.
Carnival?
I'm sorry. Yeah, Carnival, yes, that's what I said.
They own Princess?
They own everything.
Yeah, they own quite a lot.
What brands do they own?
They own Holland and Princess and a couple of other lines as well.
Carnival?
Yeah, Carnival.
I think if you buy shares, you get a discount of $50.
Yeah.
You're shareholder.
But the problem is that Holland discounts do not transfer over to Princess because they still operate as separate cruise lines. the best way I would say to have those cruise insider deals is to find a ship if they have the open ship nights. Princess, I did mine in 2016. I believe maybe they just had one, but that's, I would say, the only economical way to have an insider deal. Otherwise, you would have to go on a cruise. Maybe what you want to do is to test it out, go on a cheaper cruise. You can probably pick up an easy Alaska cruise from Vancouver, but other than that, the discounts do not apply across lines.
So a one to nowhere would count?
One
cruise to nowhere would count?
That's what those cruise tours sort of function as. A cruise to nowhere usually counts, unless they've become hip to it and they decide that they want to stop that. I mean, these are all cruise line policies, so they're subject to change. Maybe one of these days they'll say, okay, we'll do the ship tours, but we're not going to offer you insider deals anymore. So these things can always change. Okay.
Just a quick question. When you're checking prices on wherever vacations to go and all that, how often do you find that prices are changing? Is it weekly, every day, or?
I would say when I was doing it at first, I would check every day, and mostly you're looking at like a week or two that I would find that they would change prices. Okay. But that being said, they often have promotions and different one-off, one-day things. So if you have the time and you're
check every day,
and you want to, you can check every day. Otherwise, people have lives and they have other things that they want to do. So maybe they want to do something else.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'm wondering about, because I know you like nature and you've been on safari and so on. And is there any particular cruise you would recommend for African safari?
The one that I went on only went to Morroco. I would say I haven't been on an African safari through cruise, but if you were to ask me, my gut response would probably be Holland because they have that circumnavigation. Africa is a different continent because not all the major cruise lines go, just like Antarctica, not all the major cruise lines go. I would say, though, that at the very least, because of all the other infrastructure questions, for example, the shore excursions and all of that, I've been on them through Holland, I would trust them for a safari. I personally would not go on a safari via cruise myself, but I understand if that's either go on it through cruise or not. I would say take a look at some of the Holland ones, or you could even type in here, cruise compete. Let's just do that. Cruise compete.
Last question about it. That was the last question about it.
There we go. Africa cruises. So they will. You might even want to cleft it even a little more because most people who want to go on those cruises, for the best chance of seeing animals, I'd say for beginners, definitely Kruger in Johannesburg. So you might not have to search all of Africa. You might just want to do cruise compete Johannesburg and see from that point of view.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Steph, for doing the presentation today. So everyone, please give a round of applause.
In South Africa, you need a bodyguard.
Our next meetup is going to be in 2 weeks. I don't have a speaker yet. If I can't find a speaker, I'll do a talk on Rwanda, Congo, and Uganda. All right. So that's the plan. If I don't find a speaker.
I can do a talk on how to build a dividend income portfolio.
Did you have a question? You can go ahead.
I make about $2,000.
It's okay because we still have like.
Well, so I need to wrap it up. So if you guys want to, if you want to ask Steph personally, she'll be in this corner.
Yes, I'll be in the corner.
Because I need to put the